Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NIGP Content Corner, virtual instructor led behind the scenes, presented by Laura Shelters with Stacy Gregg and Charles Taylor. If at any time during the session you need tech assistance, please let me know in the Q&A or chat box. During the presentation, you may submit questions, and we will take them over the course of the presentation. Laura, would you like to get us started?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Thanks for kicking things off here. And hello, everybody. I see a number of you are joining us and saying hello in the chat, which is fantastic. Let us know where you're coming from. Like Justin said, I'm Laura Shelters. I'm the Director of Content, Research, and Development with NIGP. I've been with NIGP for about 3.5 years now. So I know many of you, but if you don't know me, I am really passionate about education, about lifelong learning, and my team really helps build the content like pathways and all of the experiences, learning experiences that are available to our members. And in today's Content Corner, we really wanted to focus on taking a deep dive on just one specific function or one specific offering, that NIGP has, which is our virtual instructor-led courses. These are multi-week offerings, so it's not a one and done type of engagement. And we'll dive into all those details in a minute, but I wanted to first take a second to have my co-presenters or speakers today just take a second to introduce themselves, who they are, where they're coming from, and their role, within IGP and education. So first up, I'll pass it over to you, Stacy, if you can give us a brief introduction to start.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, I guess, depending on where you are. I am Stacy Gregg, an instructor here with NIGP. I think I've been instructing since about 2014. My introduction to the instructor community with NIGP was actually a online train-the-trainer course that I took in order to be able to teach the LEAP classes online. And so primarily that's what I've been doing up until the pandemic, when it kind of evolved into the face-to-face environment and moving forward with the Pathways courses, teaching some face-to-face. But primarily, my preference is online, and I think it's a great platform to work in, and I'm looking forward to talking about it today.
Great, thank you, Stacy. And next up, we have Charles Taylor. So Charles, if you could just give us a brief introduction before we get started.
Yeah, so I'm Charles, and I am an instructional designer with NIGP. Been there almost 3 years, right? And I build the content that Laura was talking about earlier in her introduction.
Great, thank you, Charles. And Charles also does a lot more than just build content. He works with our instructors. Stacy's shaking her head. He works with our instructors to help them with building curriculum, but also with delivering curriculum and different technology, whether that's our LMS, our learning management system, Aspire, or, just over a Zoom call, even like, one of these sessions today. So, well, I am excited, Stacy and Charles, that you're here with me today to talk about this. I think one of the things about or really just NIGP's education portfolio is that it is a lot. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of different options compared to, let's just say, a year ago, let alone 5 or 6 years ago. So what we've done with Pathways is really focused on flexibility for our members and making sure that there are a number of different ways that you can engage and interact and get education from us and work with your peers and your instructors. And what I'm sharing on screen now is our virtual calendar. So this is something we rolled out this year in an effort to not only help members plan and forecast, what they want to do as the year goes on, and this goes all the way through next June in 2021. But it also helps agencies and chapters, plan ahead and think about, professional development paths for their folks. But what we've gotten is a lot of people that just say, hey, when I'm looking at this calendar, I see that, this offering has one date and it's offered from 2 to 4 p.m. But I see other offerings that say they're 2-week experience versus 2 days versus 4 weeks. And so what is the difference? And that's what we really want to do with this Content Corner series is we want to educate our members on what those different opportunities are, and also just give you guys a chance to ask us questions so that you feel comfortable, you're confident in registering or engaging with us in one of these opportunities. You know what you're getting into. And so today we're focusing specifically on the instructor-led virtual offerings. And these are a blended course, so a blended opportunity where you will engage in content on your own in a self-paced manner, but you also will engage with your peers in a live component where we use Zoom to connect, but then also in discussion boards and things like that. From my perspective, this is the closest offering that we really have to something that mimics a modern day kind of college experience. So a lot of times you get into a semester and, you know, if you're doing a virtual course, you're engaging with a reading on your own, but then you're also maybe assigned a group activity with some peers, and you're checking in at a set period of time throughout a number of weeks. And that's really how we've kind of modeled these virtual instructor-led courses. Real quick, somebody did ask how you can get a copy of the calendar. I'm going to have Justin go ahead and post that link in chat so he can send it to you guys right now. And it is on our website, and we update it every quarter. So you'll actually see that you will only be able to look at October courses forward, and then come January, we'll update it again. And just real quick, since I scrolled up, this calendar also includes all of our specials that are running on any of our courses. And these do apply to some of the 2-week, 3-week courses that we're going to talk about today. So great question. This is on our website, and we can send you a copy or PDF that you can print and have access to. But, you know, getting back to the experience and what this looks like, what we've done is I've compiled some questions to start us off today that we have gathered from folks in different webinars or in other engagements. And I'm going to really give our experts here, Stacy and Charles, an opportunity to just answer candidly and give you their perspective and their feedback on this specific offering that NIGP has. And what I would like to ask all of you that are attending with us today live, please don't be afraid to use the Q&A or the chat box. We'd love for this to be collaborative. So you know, ask questions. We'll get to them as we go along if it makes sense. Or at the end, there will be ample opportunity for you guys to engage with us and ask questions, not only about these offerings, but really any of our offerings at that point. You know, we'll be happy to answer any questions. So Stacy and Charles, anything you want to add before we get started?
Let's go.
No, we're good. Yep.
All right, let's roll. So the first question I have, I'm going to direct this to you, Stacy. This is something we hear a lot. What is the difference between taking a multi-week virtual course and taking the same exact course in person? Now, I have to add a caveat here that right now, obviously with COVID, our in-person courses are still being delivered virtually, but it's not exactly the same. So Stacy, can you give us your perspective on that?
My perspective is this: time is a lot of the difference in how and who controls the time. If it is a face-to-face or a what do we call it again, Laura? The virtual. If it was the face-to-face or
The virtual instructor-led.
and virtual instructor-led, then you're sitting in a learning environment for that amount of time, right? For 8 hours, 4.5 hours, 16 hours, or 24 hours. All of that is right together. If it is an online course, then you only have to do 2 hours a week for 2 weeks, and the rest of it is all managed in the time that you want to manage it, on discussion boards and doing your assignments. It really is a lot more flexible experience, and it's good for those of you who may not have 24 hours in 1 week to dedicate to one class.
That's a great point, Stacey. Really, it's you know, who's managing your time. You know, are you going to have to show up when an IGP and the instructor says you need to be there, or are you looking for a more flexible opportunity that allows you to plug and play when you have the opportunity? So thank you. I think that's a great point. And Charles, from your perspective as a content developer building, these courses versus the in-person courses, what do you think a key difference, or what would you add on to Stacy's answer?
Yeah, so I think that one of the major differences is going to be how that content, or who presents that content to the student. So, for example, in the virtual instructor-led environment, just like in a face-to-face class, all of that content is going to come directly from the instructor. The difference is with the multi-week virtual class, you have to kind of think of it like in a hybrid type environment where part of that content can be presented to you by the instructor, but it's also going to be presented to you in a different manner, which is going to be the LMS Aspire. And we'll kind of get into that later on.
Great. Thank you, Charles. And I do think that's an important component, right? When you are taking one of the in-person courses that has just been recently converted to the virtual delivery, you're going to log in and be 100% engaged in a Zoom interface. And you'll be dialed in for the whole 8 hours during the day or whatever that is, versus logging into our learning management system, where in these courses, you're kind of, you will be, accessing at specific times, like Stacy noted at the beginning, that are preset, or when you have time. So at a lunch break, when you're commuting, in the evenings when, we're all tired of watching the news, like Stacy said earlier, you can, log into the LMS and just continue that learning journey there. Another question, and this, Charles, I think is great for you, kind of tapping into the learning management system side of things. How do you access these courses? Do you have to sign on every day each week?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on which one you're talking about. So for the in-person virtual class, it's just like a regular class. If there's 2 days, you have to log in every day on time to participate in that class. Now, the multi-week virtual course is going to be different. There's going to be a component once a week where you do have to be on at a certain time, but the majority of the content you're going to be able to take at your own pace, at your own time. And so you may not have to log in every day with the multi-week virtual. It's just going to be maybe 1 day a week where you have to log in for a short period of time, as opposed to a full 8-hour experience, in a class type setting.
Thank you, Charles. And really quickly, since I do have my internet browser being shared here, I'm happy to just navigate really quickly to show you guys how you log into Aspire. So when you're on nigp.org, our learning management system is Aspire. That's what it's called. And you would just click that Aspire link directly from the website. And then you would have your NIGP credentials. And then you're able to log in. And this is what the LMS looks like. And Charles will dive a little bit more into this in a few minutes, but I just wanted to touch on that so that everybody is aware of where you are actually logging in, to these courses. So another question that that just popped up is how much access to my instructor do I have? So this was something that just came into the Q&A chat box. And so Stacy, since you are our instructor expert, I'll go ahead and pass that over to you. Just from a student's perspective, how much interaction do they get with you, and how does that look like?
So Laura, if you don't mind me going back just a quick second, I think it's important that we bring up the fact that in some of the face-to-face courses, there is an expectation that pre-work will be completed. And also following those face-to-face courses, there is an expectation that students will sign on to Aspire and finish some post-course requirements as well, such as the assessment and the course evaluation. So that's another different, whereas it's kind of natural when you're in the online class course, it's just something else to check off your list, but it's something that you have to be mindful of when you attend the face-to-face. So not to derail the conversation, but I just wanted to bring that up. And also I wanted to bring up a very cool feature about Aspire is that you can use almost anything to access the platform. So if you're at your son's basketball practice, then you can pull out your cell phone and go to Aspire and just go ahead and answer the discussion board questions. So NIGP makes it very easy for us to get to these classes anytime that we want to. And it's been a lifesaver for me as an instructor. So.
Well, and Stacy, before we jump to that question, I think that's a very valid point, right? The mobile compatibility. All of us now, our lives on the go. Maybe not so much now, since we can't really go many places.
Right.
But if you have an iPad or a Kindle or some tablet or your cell phone, and you have a few minutes of time, you are able to get in and access. And so that's a very good point. I think that makes it appealing to some people, right? That are more to interacting or communicating through their electronic devices anyways.
Okay, so now to answer your question about how much availability for the instructor, was that the question?
Yes, ma'am. So how much access would I have to my instructor in this virtual environment?
I think you have more access to some than others. Like I would have to say that Richard Pennington is probably one of the most accessible instructors or people with the office hours. And I want to say Christy Varda is the same way. And so they're definitely more accessible than I am because I don't set up office hours. However, our instructor community are among some of the most passionate procurement people that you could find. So during the course, you can expect that if you need to reach out to them by email, they're going to respond. I've never heard anyone in the instructor community complain about extra time being spent teaching a course. And in fact, even if once you leave the course, you still send emails and ask questions, or even on Insight, you see a lot of the people that are answering questions are a part of the instructor community. So very accessible. You're not going to have to beg to find them. They're always going to answer you. They're always going to be there for you. And even if, you know, sometimes I would say there've been times when I got a little busy and didn't catch that people were trying to get in touch with me, the moderators at NIGP, such as Justin, are always quick to remind me, Stacy, you did not answer this question. Can you please help this person? So there's really no chance of not being able to get in touch with someone.
And that you brought up a really good point about some, you know, instructors that have office hours versus some that, you know, do not offer that or do not, you know, have that baked into the course. I think it's important as a student to ask those questions of your instructor up front. You know, if you register for a course, it's perfectly acceptable to email your instructor and just say, hey, you know, in preparation for this class, I'd like to find out kind of expectations or what opportunities there are, you know, for me to interact or have conversations. Are there office hours? You know, are there other expectations that you have? So that kind of starts the dialogue. And another thing that I wanted to mention too, is like Stacy said, many of our instructors, I mean, they're passionate about this work and they want our members or their students to be successful. So a lot of time, I'd say almost every class, our instructors are giving out their email addresses to their students and just saying, hey, you know, after this ends, no worries. You know, if you have any questions or you want to work through anything with me, just give me a call or shoot me an email, you know, and I'll be happy to help. So I think that that's also a good perk that when you're in that online environment, you get a little bit more time over the 2 or 3 weeks to get to know your instructor and kind of build that relationship. Where in person, you know, it's a little bit of a shorter, you know, briefer time that you have to be able to get their attention or have a sidebar conversation. It's a great point. Thank you, Stacy. And so when I'm looking at this from a student's perspective, and this is probably the question that I get the most of, what is the experience like for me as a student from start to finish? And I'm going to give this to you, Charles, to answer first. So really looking from cradle to grave, you know, the day I log in to wrapping that course up, what does that experience look like?
Yeah, so when we talked about how the content is presented, so in that virtual instructor led, we said that all of the content is presented to you. And so now we're talking about that multi-week virtual course where we said part of the content is from the instructor and then part of that content is from the LMS. And so let's take a look at what that content looks like in the LMS. Now, Laura's already showed you how the login process looks. And so let's take a look at what resources are available to students inside the LMS. And so instead of explaining it, we figured it'd be better to go ahead and kind of create a video to show you what those resources look like. So I'm going to share my screen, share computer audio. And 1 second. How's that look?
Looks
See
good.
the video?
Yep.
Okay, I got a blue tint on mine. Make sure it doesn't look weird for you guys. All right, here we go. So I'm going to play the video. Let's review some of the resources available to students in a multi-week virtual class. When students are not participating in the OLLI, students were reviewing content here in Aspire, and there are 3 main areas for students. The first area is discussion forums. Discussion forums are great because they allow students to ask questions, discuss important topics, and one way instructors are using discussion forums is that they're posting the answers to activities that were done in the OLLI. And this allows students to come back and refer to these activities. Let's back up. Now we'll open up the content. So the second area allows students to review the content for that week. Let me resize this real quick. There we go. And so I'm going to jump right to lesson 3. And so the content allows students to access exercises. There's downloadable content in here. And as we can see here, there are videos. So they click the video, and we can see we have a video from
Welcome
Ron.
to the Identifying Stakeholders lesson.
And so these videos are going to be sprinkled all throughout the content for students to look at. Let's go ahead and close out the content and look at the last area. Here we go. So we can see right here, there's this week 1 upload page, and each week will have this. This is one of the major benefits of a multi-week virtual class is that students here will upload an assignment for instructors and receive individualized feedback. This is very helpful in case a student is struggling with a particular topic, or maybe they have a similar incident happening at their entity and they're wanting some advice from the instructor. Well, that basically sums up the resources available to students. Thank you. All right, yeah, so it kind of sums up the resources for students.
Great, Charles. And one thing that I wanted to just reiterate or go back and touch on, in the video, Charles made reference to an OLLI, which is what we refer those live interactive pieces of these virtual instructor-led courses. So OLLI, O-L-L-E, stands for Online Live Learning Event. I was not here when that name was made up, but it works and it's just kind of stuck with us over the years. So as Stacy had mentioned at the beginning of the call, let's just take a 2-week course. Let's say you log in on a Monday. On Wednesday at 2 p.m., the class would be required to join for 2 hours to go through the OLLI, which is what Charles was mentioning. And then, they would hang up after that live event and go through the rest of the week, content and assignments or anything. And then from there, they wouldn't dial in and be in that live environment again until the following week or the following Wednesday. So really just reiterating that live or mandatory component of being online and on a camera and on Zoom is really only 4 hours out of a 2-week experience. So it is a little bit more friendly for somebody that has that very hectic, busy schedule, whether it be at your office or at your house, your personal life. So thank you, Charles. That was very helpful. And Stacy, would you want to add on to anything there, just from the experience for a student from start to finish, based on your interactions with students over the years? You're on mute.
I'm on mute. Yes. I will say that everything that you could imagine is provided in that learning environment. So much text. The syllabus is there, so you know exactly what to expect. The instructor lays out planning for you at the beginning of the week. And you also get to see the community of colleagues that are right in that experience with you. So there's really a lot for you to walk away with in terms of resources that's provided for you inside of the online learning experience that may not be as accessible outside of it.
Well, and that's actually a really good leeway into the next question. on resources. So Charles, since you're one of the folks building these courses with our instructors, what resources are provided to our students in this virtual instructor-led environment?
So the resources provided include a series of job aids. These can consist of checklists or just basic information that you can take back to help you remember what it is that you learned in class. Other resources include helpful links, videos. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of resources available in these courses. Yeah.
And I want to touch on one thing, because I think, Charles, this is something that you took lead on helping develop at the start of this. For our in-person courses, part of the whole Pathways methodology was creating a student workbook. It's a bound resource that students get as a fillable workbook as they go through the course. We wanted to replicate that in the virtual environment. So Charles, could you just speak a little bit to what that looks like? Because I know it's not just a PDF one-for-one copy. You did some engineering to make it a more useful document.
Yeah, so we provide those online. And so in order for you to be able to take notes, we create a fillable PDF. So anytime there's note lines or spaces inside the workbook for you to kind of answer or respond to an activity, you can type in the same way you might be to write in a note. There is space for you to type in your answer and then save that document so that you have a record of those activities and discussions where, classmates came in, had provided really great suggestions, and you want to capture that, or with activities and the instructor provided some insight into, how that problem can be solved. You can take notes and save that for later use.
Yeah, excellent, Charles. I think that's a great takeaway. Literally having a physical takeaway from a class to be able to reference in the future. So that is something that we wanted to make sure was still in this virtual instructor-led environment. And Stacy, from an instructor standpoint, are there resources that you provide your students? News articles, videos, anything like that you like to share as you teach these courses?
Absolutely. Anything that I find is helpful to me on my day-to-day work or operations, I will provide to my students. And because a lot of times this discussion grows inside of discussion boards or even in our OLLI, then we also have the opportunity to provide instantly among each other, the whole group of colleagues, instructor and participants, um, documents that we might use at our desks or links to things that we may have. And then sometimes, I'll remember something interesting that I saw on the news that might pertain to whatever it is we're discussing at the time, or, on YouTube or something like that. And I'll provide that as well. And I try to make it such that the environment is synergized and everyone is doing that, so that everyone can take away what they need in order to make the connections, because that's what's important, right? In order to keep the learning relevant to what we do, I feel like making connections is the best way to do that.
Yeah, and Stacy, I think that's a very crucial point. We know from adult learning theory that peer-to-peer interaction and those connections made are really what help with retention when you're trying to learn something new, and you're trying to grasp a new concept. So you're spot on. I think our instructors are really trying to push that level of collaboration and connection. But also the courses are designed inherently just to make that happen. There's a lot of hands-on practice, even in the online virtual world. We've built in practice activities and case studies that students are able to work through. So those connections are critical, and it is something that we did not leave out. And I can speak on behalf of Stacy and our instructors. It's something that our instructors are really phenomenal at doing. Most of our instructors are practicing, practitioners. So able to pull in from, like Stacy said, the day-to-day and be able to share that information with our students. So thank you, Stacy.
Right. Well, and you know what? Procurement is a very collaborative community, just organically. And so a lot of times we share with each other, and it doesn't have to be instructor to participants. A lot of times inside of the course or inside of the classroom or inside of a conversation or a meeting anywhere, we share documents. And so this gives us time not to have to wait until the 3 days are over to go back and look for the document and then remember to email it to the whole course or whole class, but to send it right then and there at the time when it becomes a discussion point.
Yeah, great point, Stacy. And Charles, from your standpoint, kind of switching gears and following up on that collaboration piece, one of the things that we know and we hear from students all the time, and I remember being at Forum, not this year, but last year, and people saying, Laura, online learning is great, but I just like connecting with people. I like talking to people and being, in the flesh with them. Obviously pre-COVID mentality, right? Like we've all have a little bit different viewpoint of that now, probably. But with that mentality of, I really like to collaborate with my peers. I want to make those connections. How do we, how have we achieved that in this format? And I think we've talked a little bit about this with Stacy and I just now, but Charles, as far as the engineering within the class and the technology, what else is available that really helps enhance those connections and that collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, so when we develop these courses, we, as you said, we design with collaboration as the focus. And so when it comes to our face-to-face classes, we're designing group exercises, class discussions, various ways for collaboration to happen. And when that class then converts into a virtual setting, those collaborative pieces stay with the class. That does not change. The only thing that changes is going to be that approach. So, I mean, we can't talk to people directly, but we have class discussions in Zoom, just like you would in a class. And then when it comes to group work, we use a feature in Zoom called, I'm forgetting the name. What's it called in Zoom? The groups?
The breakout
rooms. There you go.
Yeah.
And so the breakout rooms work just like they would in a group setting in a class, where students are brought into their own room of 4 or 5 students, and then they can work through that problem. And then the instructor will call them out of that room and then report to the class. So it's a different way of applying the collaboration, but it's still very much alive in the virtual setting.
And Charles, is there, at the beginning, I know you mentioned the discussion features. And so is that, like a chat? How does that kind of function within the system?
I'm sorry, say again, the chat? I'm not sure.
The discussion boards, the discussion forums?
Oh yeah, so yeah, so all of our online courses, we also incorporate discussion boards on a weekly basis for our content. So if you're in a 2-week course or 3-week course, you expect that there's going to be a discussion board for every week. That's typically going to be a place where you can ask questions and get instructor feedback. There's also going to be just overall topics being discussed in there. A lot of times, if the class, this is one of the benefits too of the virtual setting, is that in a class, a lot of times you can generate a lot of ideas within that class, but there's a limited amount of time that you can have that discussion because you have to move on to the next topic. Well, the beauty of these discussion forums is that you can leave them up all week, and then there's a record for people to look back and see what suggestions were made or how people solved the problem. And the other way that discussion forums are used in the virtual setting, like I mentioned in the video, a lot of times in the instructor manual, there's a detailed answer for an activity. And as we talked about, there's limited time in that classroom setting to maybe do that, to go over that detailed answer. Instructors have been posting that answer in the discussion forums. And that's a way for students to kind of go back and look at that and take down that answer and use it later on.
Thank you, Charles. I think that is one of the kind of unsung heroes in the virtual environment, is that collaboration tool. It's very similar to our Insight community that many of our members are used to using anyways. We've just embedded it within the course, so you still have access, and again, focusing on those connections with your peers. That's really what is most crucial for that learning to happen. So I just got a question here from somebody, and I'll give it to you, Stacy, first, and then we'll see if Charles, if you have anything else to add. But what would you, or what tips or best practices would you give somebody new to learning in a virtual environment?
Okay, so I've seen this from the perspective of a student and an instructor. Um, to help make me successful is to well, I've already said it to Laura that I'm a hoarder when it comes to stuff like that, digital things. And so much is provided. I would not go through the discussion boards and copy and paste that stuff. But the resources that we provide, I would say definitely save it. So when very first week that you log on, you're going to be given a syllabus and all of the expectations. I think Justin sends ahead of it. He sends all of these tips that you might need in order to get through Aspire. I would save all of that in a folder. And then I would save each week in its own folder, and all of the resources that are provided there, I would save it. That becomes a resource for you later on if you're trying to remember how you did something in a course or why you did it. And then also when you're going back to study for the NIGP, CPP examination, or even the two that you would take for the UPPCC. So that, to me, save it, and also set aside some quiet time, because what typically ends up happening is you have deadlines to meet in order to stay current with the course or even successfully complete the course, and you're ultimately rushing to get through it, and you don't retain the information that has been placed out there for you. So if you could just set aside some time for yourself, so that you are making the connections, just like Laura said, maybe your lunchtime. I know that some people say that their employees do not like them doing it at home. Sometimes it's beneficial to do it at home if you have the quiet time, or maybe get to work 30 minutes early so that you can work on it in quietness. But just give it the attention that you would if you were away from the office, so that you can retain it. I mean, anybody can get through it and turn in all their stuff and meet all of the requirements that NIGP has set forth in order to be considered successful. But to me, successful is having information that you can use inside of your daily operations. And so that's what I'm saying to do in order to have that. You're on mute.
Here I go. Yeah, I was gonna say, here I go. doing the same thing. That is very important too. And I would add to that and say, even when I'm taking professional development for myself in a virtual environment, I tend to shut down my email. I put on an out of office. I mean, I really want to make sure that I get out of it what I need to. And that is what I say to a lot of adults, is that really, as an adult, you have to make a choice. You can show up in class and I can talk and I can make it as interesting and as exciting as it can be, but you have to want to be there. You need to be committed to the process and have things like Stacy mentioned, like a folder to put all the resources, and a way to create a community. So start writing down the email addresses or getting the names and info from the other students in your class so that you can connect afterwards. And so there are a lot of tips, especially now out there, for just how to be a very effective learner in a virtual world. And so there are a lot that you can read out there, a lot that you can get from us if you need tips with Zoom or anything like that. We're happy to send you guys resources. We have all of that ready for our students, because ultimately we want to make sure that everybody's ready to succeed in these courses. They're not easy by any means. And Stacy, being somebody who helped build some of the content, wanted to make them, I don't know if rigorous is the word, but you need to be applying critical thinking. You need to be
Right.
and you need to be really coming and ready to share for you and all of your peers to get the most out of it. So that's kind of my tip is, a lot of people will think, oh, I'll just sign up for virtual and I'll click through it and I'll just get my certificate. We did not design our courses like that. We designed our courses for you to be engaged, for you to really be getting the value out of it, and to be able to act when you get back to your desk and, put into motion the concepts and the practice that you had while you were in the classroom with us, whether that's in person or in that virtual. So I think that is great tips. And Charles, I don't know if you have anything to add to that from your perspective, as far as, just tips for learning in a virtual world.
Yeah, the only thing I'd recommend is just kind of get involved early and often. And an LMS for a lot of people is going to be a new system they're interacting with, and so you always want to save time early on to kind of get acquainted with that system, just so that you can get a good start in that course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Charles. Oh, go ahead,
Laura,
Stacy.
I was just going to say, you touched on something that's very important, and so did Charles, that you have to put in the time. And especially when you show up for Ollie's, be prepared to participate and to contribute, because that's how you're going to get the value out of the course, and that's how you're going to create value for everybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you both. I don't know, the chat has kind of quieted down. So I don't see any questions that I haven't answered already in the Q&A box. So we'll give it a minute. Those of you on the line with us, if you have any questions, any comments, even if it's not 100% related to the virtual offerings here, now's the time to ask. Stacy, Charles, and I will wait a few, let's see, 30 seconds here and see if anybody has any questions that pop in before we adjourn. But the only other comment I would make is, when you're considering looking at a learning option, I think a lot of people think, okay, well, on demand or the virtual instructor led, which one do I want? The on-demand offerings are in the LMS. There's no start date. There's no end date. The moment you register for that course, you will get access, and you'll have access for the life of that content in the learning management system. The 2-week courses, even though we mentioned earlier, it's still more flexibility with time, it is still boxed within, that 2-week period. So the course starts at a certain time. There may be pre-work before that, but you start at a certain time, you end at a certain time, you take your assessment, and you kind of move on. So just when you're looking at the different virtual options, on demand is really good for somebody who's extremely self-motivated, very disciplined with learning virtually, somebody who's probably already experienced with the virtual learning. And then the virtual instructor led is more of a good way to ease into that online learning life, because you have your instructor still there to help. You're able to connect live on the phone, and you still have that verbal interaction. So just some comments around kind of which choice. Then the other factor here, or something that is a great point, and let me go ahead and just reshare my screen. Somebody just mentioned, the cost differences, or what does that look like? So you will find that we have standardized our pricing as best as we can to try to help not only members, but also just planning, for agencies at large when you're doing departmental workforce development planning. But so you'll see here that, let me go to a good 2-week experience. Our member price is always listed first. So this is the course certificate for Foundations of Sourcing and Contracting, which actually includes 4 competency modules from the Public Procurement Competency Framework that roll into one certificate that's taught in this 2-week experience. So that's $595 for those 2-week courses. At the end of those 2-week courses too, I forgot to mention, the instant recognition piece is also something that's very important to a lot of adults, and especially if you're, using your organization's funding to take training, you have to prove kind of the value or the return. You receive not only a certificate that we've learned Stacy likes to hoard, but also a digital badge. So digital badging is something that we've tied into all of our virtual offerings. And when you finish a course and you take the test, you will be issued a digital badge from within the learning management system. And that is something that you can share not only with your supervisor or within your chain of command, but also you can share it in LinkedIn, in your social media platforms. And that's a great way to just show your recognitions to your peers and your achievements, but also becomes a really good way, if you are looking for another job, or if an opportunity comes up, employers can say, okay, well, this person has these certificates in this area. We know they're very competent and skilled, in these topics. So that is also another thing I just wanted to mention, with the cost, there's the certificate piece of it. And our core certificates, we have 3 core certificates that if you take them, you actually will earn a designation, which is the Public Procurement Associate designation, which is a very good designation for somebody newer to procurement that's maybe a little bit farther off from certification, but still wants to be able to prove their value and prove their knowledge. So there are a lot of options in here for somebody as far as how you interact with our courses and what that looks like. And something else I want to mention, if you take a course, let's say you wanted to get the designation I just referenced. If you take one certificate virtual, and then hopefully we get back into the classroom next year and you take the two other certificates in the classroom, you still get the designation. It all plugs into our learning management system at the end of the day, and it will recognize that you have taken all of the things required, whether it be in the classroom or online, to meet that designation eligibility. So that is something else. You don't have to say, I'm going to be an online learner and that's it. When we are back into in-person classrooms, you can do both, interact with the courses, how it makes sense for you. And then I do want to mention, just with, I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, we have some discounts running through December on competency modules that are shown in this schedule. And I know Justin sent that out. And also on some of the bundled offerings. So take a look at that. If you have any questions or anything that you see there, I am always happy to answer questions or hop on a call and talk through anything with anybody. And I'll put my email address in the chat now. Otherwise, I do not see any other questions. So I think Stacy and Charles, I just will say thank you so much for your time today and your expertise and sharing with us. And I will gift everybody back 14 minutes of your day.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.